Hi, this is Professor Tiffany Martin with Medical Microbiology, and we are in Chapter 7, Microbial Genetics. And we've talked about what mutations are, and this video is going to address what causes a mutation. So how do you get a change in a nucleotide sequence? How does that work? All right, so sometimes mutations, oops, I'm ahead of myself. Sometimes mutations just happen. They're spontaneous. These enzymes that we've been talking about in replication, they're very good at their job, especially eukaryotic enzymes. They're even better at proofreading and making sure that they don't make a mistake. Prokaryotic DNA polymerases, they also proofread, not as much. They have to move very quickly, and sometimes they just make a mistake. And in fact, you can kind of count on for every so many base pairs read, there'll be a mistake that's made. So you can calculate like a replication and error rate in the replication. So sometimes these mistakes just happen, spontaneous. And remember, we said most of the time they're bad. So if a mistake happens, makes a mutation in a gene, then the cell is going to die. You know, if it's fatal. So that happens. So sometimes it just happens. Um, but there are some chemicals and situations, environments that can increase that mutation rate. So it makes it happen more frequently than normal. So one thing that can increase the mutation rate is radiation. And we refer to this as a mutagen. A chemical or a physical environment that can increase your mutation rate are referred to as mutagens. So radiation is a type of mutagen. This is why when you go to the dentist office and they make you, it's time for x-rays, and they make you wear that lead vest, and the technician steps out of the room, the radiation there can cause electrons to get excited, and they jump, and when they move fast and get excited, it breaks some of those covalent bonds. And we know the sugar phosphate backbone is made up of covalent bonds. So if you get breakages there, your cell tries to repair it, and it just is never right. And so you can get some mutations that way. So x-rays are one type of mutagen that can cause that. Another type of radiation that is also a mutagenic, is ultraviolet radiation. So gamma rays and x-rays are ionizing radiation. They cause excited electrons. Ultraviolet is non-ionizing radiation, and it affects the DNA a little differently. And what happens is every time there's two thymines next to each other, if it gets hit with UV light, then those thymines, instead of binding with the hydrogen bonding with the A across from it, end up binding with each other, and they form what we call thymine dimers. And when that happens, the DNA is not as it's supposed to, and it kind of makes a little bubble in the DNA, and then the next time replication occurs, it doesn't pair up right, and it doesn't get replicated correctly. So that ends up with a mutation. UV light, this is why they tell you to protect yourself in the sun. Skin cancers, if you get enough of these over a period of time, you can knock out some important genes in the regulation of cell division, and it can start growing and form like a tumor. Cancer. So this is a type of mutagen, UV radiation. What else? There are some chemicals that cause mutations, and then you see some warning labels on things that this is a mutagenic and stay back. There's different chemicals that can cause mutations. One particular chemical that ends up causing mutations is classified as an analog, nucleotide analogs. So here's the normal thymine and what that looks like. There are some chemicals that have a structure that looks very similar to a nucleotide. One of these is called 5'-bromouracil. And 5'-bromouracil, if you compare, the only difference is this one chemical group off this one strain. And so it looks very similar. So we call these analogs. 5'-bromouracil is an analog to the nucleotide thymine. So if I have a lot of this chemical in my bloodstream, and these chemicals may not be bad, we can actually use this as a drug. As a cancer drug. This is one particular drug, chemical that's used as a cancer drug. Let's see what happens. So I have my normal DNA, but I have a lot of this drug in the system, and when replication is happening very quickly, mistakes can happen. And so the as it's replicating, instead of grabbing a thymine, the polymerase, instead of grabbing a thymine, it will grab this 5' uracil and put that in instead. That becomes an issue because the next time that cell divides, 5' uracil doesn't bind right. Instead of binding to an A like normal thymine does, it actually forms a hydrogen bonds with guanine. And so you can see you end up with a base pair substitution. All right, so how does this become a drug? Say this normal DNA is in a tumor cell. You've got a group of cells that have lost their ability to regulate themselves and they are dividing uncontrollably. This is what a tumor is. It's a mass of replicating cells that shouldn't be there. If we let it go on, then it can cause problems in our systems. So this is my normal DNA. But this normal DNA has some other problems where it's replicating and causing a tumor. So I'm going to add this drug, this cancer drug, and as this tumor is replicating, and remember it's replicating very quickly, that's what tumor cells do, some of these drugs get incorporated into the tumor instead of the normal one. And then now I have mutations and now those cells die. So we can kill those tumor cells. So an anti-cancer drugs can be used, nucleotide analogs can be used as anti-cancer drugs because these tumor cells are replicating quickly. Now, when you think about cancer and some of these drugs, nucleotide analogs, drugs that they use, what are the side effects that are typical of a lot of types of chemotherapy? I'm sure you're thinking of them. Your hair falls out, right? Maybe you get skin rashes, nausea, mucous membranes kind of things. You get that, tired, lethargic, those types of things. Your immune system, compromised immune system. All right, let's look at the cells involved in all those processes. The cells that make your hair grow, these are rapidly dividing cells. Like our heart cells, they form a heart and then they don't keep dividing. Our hair cells is the type of cell that keeps dividing. So they are also susceptible to those chemical drugs, the ones that are incorporating those nucleotide analogs and then dying. So that happens in your hair falls out. Same thing with your skin. This is another cell type that continues to divide. So you kind of get rashes, mucous membranes, nausea, digestion issues. Those mucous membranes are constantly replicating, and so they're very susceptible to these types of drugs that that use nucleotide analogs and get involved in there, and the cells die. What else? Immune system. Your white blood cells are replicating. Tiredness, red blood cells, they're replicating. They can't get iron. You end up lethargic. So all of these side effects are due to the fact that the rapidly dividing cells are also susceptible to the drugs. Good news is that so is your tumor cells. If you can handle the side effects long enough, your hair falling out and other things, to kill the tumor cells, then that's good. So it's all about balancing. Can you deal with the side effects long enough to get the drug to do what it's supposed to do? These types of drugs are also used as antiviral drugs because viruses also replicate very quickly. Okay, so frequency of mutations are rare events. We talked about that, but these mutagens can increase that mutation rate. Depends on the mutagen, depends on the dosage that you're exposed to, which is why you can get dental x-rays, once a year, but your technician who's doing it every day steps out of the room. So dosage is very important when you talk about being exposed to mutagens. Frequency in bacteria, sometimes we think of bacteria mutating more quickly, but it's just because their generation is so quick that it's more apparent in bacteria. So that's why we think of bacteria very quickly mutating and evolving, like viruses. We're worried about this virus evolving. We're talking about flu viruses, and flu viruses can mutate from one season to the next, so much so that the vaccine is not as effective. There are some organisms that quickly mutate, and the ones that are bad die off, no problems. The ones that gives a survival advantage stay around, and they persist, and so it's a numbers game for that. Okay, so we'll stop this video and pick it up with the very last one and at the end. So see you then.